Welcome, seekers of destiny, to a tale where ordinary becomes extraordinary in the space of a heartbeat. Meet Elena Sinclair, a woman whose carefully constructed life of predictable routines and quiet contentment is about to shatter like glass against stone. She believes herself unremarkable, invisible even, working her shifts at the dusty antiquarian bookshop in Millbrook Falls, a town so small it barely merits on most maps. But some secrets refuse to stay buried. Some bloodlines call across centuries. And some powers can't stay hidden forever. Tonight, as autumn winds carry whispers of change through the mountains, Elena's world will crack open to reveal truths that will remake everything she thought she knew about herself. An ancient legacy pulses in her veins, waiting, watching, ready to awaken. And he's coming for her, the alpha whose very soul recognizes what she cannot yet see. Some alphas will risk everything to protect their fated mate, even when she doesn't know she needs protecting. The moon rises full tonight, and with it, Elena Sinclair's hidden power stirs from its slumber. Chapter 1. The grandfather clock in Whitmore's rare books chimed 9 times, its bronze voice echoing through the cramped aisles like a funeral bell. Elena Sinclair didn't look up from the leather-bound volume she was cataloging, something about medieval herbal remedies that made her fingertips tingle strangely when she touched the yellowed pages. She'd been having that reaction to old books more frequently lately, along with the dreams that left her sheets soaked in sweat and her heart hammering against her ribs. Just stress, she murmured to herself, the same lie she'd been telling herself for weeks. The promotion at the university library had fallen through again, her landlord was raising her rent, and her mother's medical bills continued to mount despite the insurance. Stress could explain the strange sensations, the hyperactive senses that made car horns sound like sonic booms and made her able to smell Mrs. Patterson's perfume from 3 blocks away. It couldn't explain the dreams, though. In those dreams, she ran through moonlit forests on legs that felt too strong, too fast, too sure. She could taste the wind and hear heartbeats in the darkness. Sometimes she woke with dirt under her fingernails despite never leaving her apartment. The shop's bell jangled, jerking her back to reality. She glanced at the clock again. 9:17 p.m. They'd been closed for over an hour, but old Mr. Whitmore often forgot to lock the door when he left early for his weekly poker game. "I'm sorry, but we're closed," Elena called out, not bothering to look up from her work. The silence that followed raised the fine hairs on her arms. She could feel someone watching her, a weight of attention that made her skin prickle, with an awareness that felt almost predatory. Slowly, Elena lifted her head. The man standing between the towering bookshelves looked like he'd stepped out of one of the romance novels hidden in the shop's back room. Tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that looked like he'd run his fingers through it and storm-gray eyes that seemed to see straight through her. He wore a black leather jacket that emphasized the lean muscle beneath, and when he moved deeper into the shop, it was with a fluid grace that reminded her of the wolves she'd been dreaming about. Elena. Her name on his lips wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, delivered in a voice like aged whiskey and smoke. Her heart lurched. "Do I know you?" He moved closer, each step deliberate and measured. The air around him seemed to shimmer with barely contained energy, and Elena found herself gripping the edge of the counter so hard her knuckles went white. "You're about to," he said. "My name is Kieran Blackthorne." The name hit her like a physical blow. Images flashed behind her eyes, a massive black wolf with silver eyes, moonlight on fur, the scent of pine, and something wild and male that made her mouth water. Elena staggered, one hand flying to her temple. "That's impossible," she whispered. "I've never—" "Elena." Kieran was in front of her now, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. His scent wrapped around her, pine and leather, and something deeper, something that called to a part of her she didn't understand. "You need to listen to me very carefully. You're in danger." "What?" The word came out as a squeak. "I don't understand. I'm nobody. I work in a bookshop. I live alone. I don't even have a cat because animals make you nervous," he finished. "Because they sense what you are, even when you don't." Elena's vision blurred. The room tilted sideways, and she would have fallen if strong hands hadn't caught her shoulders. The moment Kieran touched her, electricity shot through her veins like liquid fire. Every nerve ending came alive, and for a split second, she could swear she felt something wild and powerful unfurling in her chest. "What's happening to me?" she gasped. Kieran's eyes searched her face with an intensity that made her feel exposed, vulnerable. "Your power is awakening, Elena. And when it does, every supernatural creature within 100 miles will sense it. Some of them want to protect you." His jaw tightened. "Others want to use you. Or kill you." "Supernatural?" Elena laughed, but it came out shrill and panicked. "This is insane. You're insane. I need to call the police." She reached for the phone behind the counter, but before her fingers could touch it, every light in the shop exploded in a shower of sparks. In the sudden darkness, Elena heard Kieran curse, a word that sounded ancient and vicious. Then the howling started. It came from outside, rising and falling in harmonies that shouldn't exist, voices that were too large and too wild to be human. Elena's blood turned to ice in her veins, but beneath the terror, something else stirred. Something that wanted to answer those calls. "They've found you," Kieran growled. In the darkness, his eyes seemed to glow with silver light. "Elena, I need you to trust me."
"Can you do that?"
"I don't even know you. Your soul knows me." He cupped her face in his hands, and the touch sent shockwaves through her entire body. "Just like mine knows you. You're my mate, Elena. My fated mate. And I will die before I let them take you." Before she could process his words, before she could argue or run or scream, the front window exploded inward in a cascade of glass and fury. 3 shapes bounded through the opening. Massive, snarling creatures that were too large to be dogs, too wild to be anything natural. Wolves. They were wolves. Elena opened her mouth to scream, but what came out wasn't entirely human. It was a sound of challenge, of awakening power, and when it tore from her throat, every piece of glass in the shop shattered at once. The wolves skidded to a halt, their heads swiveling toward her with expressions of shock and something that might have been fear. "Impossible." One of them spoke, its voice a guttural rasp that barely sounded human. "She's not awakened yet. She can't be that strong already." Kieran moved in front of Elena, and she could feel the tension radiating from his body like heat from a furnace. "You're too late, Marcus. She's under my protection now." "Is she?" The largest wolf began to circle them, its lips pulled back to reveal teeth like ivory daggers. "Does she even know what she is yet, Blackthorne? What she's capable of?" Its yellow eyes fixed on Elena. "Do you know what runs in your blood, little girl? Do you know why we've spent 20 years searching for you?" Elena's vision wavered. 20 years. She was 24 years old. "Tell her," the wolf taunted. "Tell her about her mother. Tell her about the prophecy. Tell her why every pack in North America would kill for the chance to control what she'll become." "Elena." Kieran's voice cut through the rising panic. "Look at me. Only me." She did, and found herself drowning in storm-gray eyes that held decades of secrets. "I'll explain everything," he promised. "But first, we need to get out of here. Can you walk?" Elena nodded, though she wasn't sure her legs would support her. The power that had erupted from her throat was still coursing through her veins, making her feel electric and strange and terrifyingly alive. Kieran took her hand, and the moment their fingers intertwined, Elena felt something snap into place in her chest. Like a lock finding its key. Like coming home. Then the largest wolf laughed, a sound like breaking bones. "Run if you want, Blackthorne. But you can't protect her forever. The crimson moon rises in 3 days. And when it does, she'll either join us willingly." The creature's eyes glowed like molten gold. "Or we'll take what we need from her corpse." Elena's world tilted on its axis as Kieran pulled her toward the shop's back exit, but just before they disappeared into the alley, she heard one of the wolves call out, "Sweet dreams, Elena Ravencrest. When you wake up, you'll finally know what you really are." Ravencrest. That wasn't her name. Her name was Sinclair. It had always been Sinclair, hadn't it? Chapter 2. The motorcycle roared through the mountain roads like a living thing, its engine purring with barely restrained power. Elena clung to Kieran's leather jacket, her face pressed against his broad back as they carved through switchbacks that would have terrified her under normal circumstances. But nothing about this night was normal. Behind them, howls echoed through the valleys, hunting calls that raised every primitive instinct Elena didn't know she possessed. They were being followed. "Where are we going?" she shouted over the wind, her words almost lost in the rush of air. "Somewhere safe," Kieran called back. "Somewhere they can't follow." The bike climbed higher into the mountains, away from civilization and into wilderness that felt ancient and watchful. Elena's enhanced senses, when had they become enhanced, picked up scents of pine and granite and something else, something that made the strange power in her chest pulse with recognition. They rode for what felt like hours before Kieran finally slowed, turning onto a hidden dirt road that was barely more than a deer trail. The path wound through towering pines and ended at a cabin that looked like it had grown from the mountain itself, logs weathered silver by decades of storms, windows that glowed with warm amber light, and a wraparound porch that welcomed them like open arms. Kieran killed the engine, and the sudden silence felt profound. Elena could hear her own heartbeat, the rustle of small creatures in the underbrush, and something else, the distant sound of running water. "This is your safe place?" Elena asked as she slid off the bike on unsteady legs. Her body still thrummed with adrenaline and that strange new energy that made her feel like she was vibrating on a frequency just beyond human perception. "One of them." Kieran dismounted with fluid grace and led her toward the cabin. "The land has been in my family for over 2 centuries. It's warded against those who mean harm." "Warded?" Elena stopped dead. "Like magic?" Kieran turned to study her face in the moonlight. "You felt it when we crossed the threshold, didn't you? The way your power settled, like it recognized home." He was right. The moment they'd turned onto the hidden road, the chaotic energy coursing through Elena's veins had calmed to a steady, warm pulse. She felt safe, protected, like the very earth beneath her feet was offering sanctuary. "I don't understand any of this," she whispered. 6 hours ago, I was cataloging books and worrying about my electric bill. Now I'm running from wolves who can talk, and you're telling me I have power, and—" Her voice cracked. "And you called me your mate." Kieran's expression softened, and he stepped closer. When he spoke, his voice was gentle, almost reverent. "Elena, what do you know about your family? Your real family? My mother raised me alone. She died when I was 18. Lung cancer." The familiar ache of loss squeezed her chest. "She never talked about my father or any other relatives. I always assumed." Elena trailed off, remembering the dying woman's fevered whispers in those final days. Strange words about wolves and moon-blessed daughters and ancient promises that Elena had dismissed as morphine-induced hallucinations. "Your mother was Marie Ravencrest," Kieran said quietly. "She was the daughter of the Ravencrest Pax Alpha and one of the most powerful healers our kind has ever known." "Our kind?" Elena's legs felt weak. "You mean werewolves?" "Shifters. Yes." He gestured toward the cabin. "Come inside. You're shivering." Elena looked down at her hands and saw that he was right. They were trembling uncontrollably. But she wasn't sure if it was from the mountain air or from the magnitude of what he was telling her. The cabin's interior was a study in masculine comfort, leather furniture arranged around a massive stone fireplace, bookshelves that reached to the vaulted ceiling, and Native American artifacts that looked ancient and precious. Kieran guided her to the couch and built up the fire with movements that were economical and sure. "Tell me about my mother," Elena said when he settled beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth, but not touching. She found herself wishing he would touch her. The mate bond, if that's what this was, made her hyper-aware of his every movement, his every breath. Marie was extraordinary. Kieran stared into the flames. She could heal injuries that should have been fatal, could sense sickness before symptoms appeared. Some said she could even heal broken hearts. His smile was sad. She was also stubborn, passionate, and completely unwilling to be told what to do by the pack elders. That sounds like her, Elena murmured. Her mother had been fiercely independent, working 3 jobs to keep them afloat and never accepting charity from anyone. When she was 18, she fell in love with a human. Kieran's voice grew careful. Your father. Elena jerked upright. You knew my father? I knew of him. The pack didn't approve. Mixed matings are rare, and children from such unions. He met her eyes. They're either completely human or there's something unprecedented. Something more powerful than pure-blooded shifters. More powerful how? Kieran was quiet for a long moment, and Elena could practically see him weighing his words. Pure-blood shifters have one form, human and wolf. But children of mixed heritage who inherit the gift, they can be bridges between worlds. They can command elements, heal both shifter and human ailments, and their psychic abilities. He shook his head. The prophecies say a daughter born of 2 worlds will unite the packs under one moon. Elena's breath caught. The wolves tonight. They mentioned a prophecy. The prophecy of the moon-blessed daughter. It's been passed down for over 1,000 years. Kieran turned to face her fully, and his eyes were intense, burning. It speaks of a woman who will rise during the crimson moon, a lunar eclipse that happens once every generation. She'll have the power to heal the ancient rifts between the packs, to bring peace to our kind. Or, his jaw tightened, or she'll have the power to destroy us all. The fire crackled in the silence that followed. Elena pulled her knees up to her chest, trying to process everything. The wolves tonight, Marcus. They want to use me somehow. Marcus leads the Shadow Ridge pack. They believe the prophecy means the moon-blessed daughter should rule through strength and fear. They want to control your power, use it to dominate the other packs. Kieran's hands clenched into fists. They've been searching for you since your mother disappeared 24 years ago. She ran away. Elena's voice was barely a whisper. She ran away to protect me. And she succeeded. For 24 years, you lived as a human. Your power stayed dormant, hidden. Kieran reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face, and Elena's entire body lit up at the contact. But dormant power doesn't stay buried forever. Especially not as the crimson moon approaches. Elena leaned into his touch without thinking. When is it? The eclipse. 2 days. 2 days. Elena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of destiny settling on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. When she opened them again, Kieran was watching her with an expression that made her chest tight. What are you thinking? She asked. That you're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen, he said simply. And that I should have found you sooner. Heat bloomed in Elena's cheeks. Kieran, you feel it too. His thumb traced along her jawline. The pull between us. The recognition. She did. God help her, she did. From the moment he'd spoken her name in the bookshop, something had been building between them. A connection that felt older than memory, stronger than reason. I don't understand how this works, she admitted. The mate thing. Kieran's smile was soft, almost shy. Shifters know their mates by scent, by the way their souls recognize each other. It's not always immediate, sometimes it takes time to develop. But when it happens, he cupped her face in both hands. When it happens, it's forever. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. And you knew? The moment you saw me? The moment I caught your scent outside the bookshop. His eyes darkened. Pine and moonlight, and something uniquely you. It called to everything wild in me. Before Elena could lose her nerve, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was electric, literally. Power arced between them, and Elena gasped against Kieran's mouth as every light bulb in the cabin flared brilliantly before settling to a warm glow. She could feel her abilities responding to him, to the mate bond, growing stronger with every heartbeat. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Kieran rested his forehead against hers. Elena, he murmured, there's something else you need to know. The serious tone in his voice made her stomach clench. What? The Shadow Ridge pack isn't the only one looking for you. There are others who believe the prophecy should never be fulfilled. His hands tightened on her face. They call themselves the Order of the Silver Moon, and they think the only way to prevent disaster is to kill the moon-blessed daughter before she can come into her full power. Elena's blood turned to ice. They want to kill me. They've been tracking bloodlines for decades, eliminating anyone who might carry the gift. Your mother knew about them. It's part of why she ran. How many? Elena's voice was steady, though inside, she was screaming. How many are coming for me? Kieran's expression was grim. All of them, Elena. Every pack with a stake in the prophecy will converge here before the crimson moon rises. Some want to protect you, some want to use you, and some want you dead. He kissed her forehead gently. But I won't let any of them hurt you. I swear it on my life. Before Elena could respond, before she could tell him that she was terrified and exhilarated and completely out of her depth, a new sound reached her enhanced hearing. Engines. Multiple motorcycles, roaring up the mountain road. Kieran's head snapped up, his entire body going rigid with alertness. They found us. I thought you said this place was warded. His smile was sharp, predatory. It is. Which means whoever's coming. His eyes began to glow with silver light. They're not here to hurt you. Elena felt her own power stir in response to his, and for the first time since this nightmare began, she wasn't entirely afraid. Whatever was coming, she wouldn't face it alone. The sound of approaching engines grew louder, and with it came howls, not hunting calls this time, but songs of greeting, songs of welcome. Kieran's pack was coming home. Chapter 3. The first motorcycle to emerge from the tree line carried a woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a Viking saga. Tall and lean with platinum blonde hair braided down her back, she dismounted with predatory grace and fixed Elena with eyes the color of winter ice. Behind her came 3 more riders, 2 men who looked like they could bench press small cars, and another woman with intricate tattoos covering her arms. Elena instinctively moved closer to Kieran, her newfound power humming with uncertainty. These people radiated danger the way normal people radiated body heat. Kieran. The blonde woman's voice carried the hint of an accent Elena couldn't place. You've been busy. Astrid. Kieran's tone held warmth and respect. I wasn't expecting you back from the Northern Territories for another week. Plans changed when we felt the power surge 3 hours ago. Astrid's gaze flicked to Elena, and her expression shifted from wariness to something that might have been awe. Every supernatural creature within 200 miles felt it. The trees are still humming. Elena blinked. Trees? You shattered the barrier between the physical and spiritual realms for a full 30 seconds, one of the men said, his voice tinged with amazement. He was younger than the others, maybe mid-20s, with kind brown eyes and a smile that reached them. I'm Owen, by the way. And that was the most incredible display of raw power I've witnessed in my lifetime. Owen's our pack historian, Kieran explained. If anyone would know the significance of what you did, it's him. What I did was scream, Elena protested. I don't even know how I did it. The tattooed woman snorted. Honey, that wasn't a scream. That was a declaration of war. Every alpha within 5 states is either on their way here or preparing their defenses. She extended a hand to Elena. I'm Saya, pack enforcer and general pain in Kieran's ass. Despite her fear, Elena found herself smiling as she shook Saya's hand. The woman's grip was firm and calloused, speaking of hard work and harder fights. And I'm Marcus, the last man said, stepping forward. Elena tensed, remembering the wolf from the bookshop, but Kieran's hand on her shoulder was reassuring. Different Marcus, he murmured. This one actually likes you. Marcus, this Marcus, was built like a tank, with graying temples and scars that told stories Elena wasn't sure she wanted to hear. But his eyes were kind, and when he smiled, she saw something paternal in his expression. Welcome to the Blackthorne pack, little sister, he said gently. We've been waiting for you for a very long time. The casual acceptance in his voice made Elena's throat tight with emotion. She'd spent her entire adult life feeling like she didn't quite fit anywhere. Too bookish for her college friends, too poor for her coworkers, too practical for the dreamers, and too dreamy for the realists. But these strangers were looking at her like she belonged. "How many of you are there?" Elena asked. 37 active members, Astrid answered. "Though not all live on packlands. Some prefer city life, others patrol our borders." Her expression grew serious. "All of them would die for you. They don't even know me." "They know what you represent," Owen said softly.
"Hope.
"For the first time in generations, we have hope that the endless feuding between packs might end." Elena looked around at their faces, expectant, protective, fierce. The weight of their hope was almost as heavy as the power coursing through her veins. "No pressure," she muttered. Saya laughed, a sound like silver bells and breaking glass. "I like her already." "We should go inside," Kieran said. "Elena needs to understand what she's facing, and we need to plan." "The crimson moon rises tomorrow night," Astrid finished grimly. "Which gives us less time than we hoped." Elena's stomach dropped. "Tomorrow? But you said 2 days." Kieran's jaw tightened. "I was wrong." "Owen?" The young historian pulled out what looked like an ancient tablet, its surface covered in symbols that seemed to shift and dance in the moonlight. The lunar calculations were thrown off by the power surge. "The moon's cycle is accelerating." He looked up, his brown eyes troubled. "The eclipse will begin at sunset tomorrow." "Fuck," Saya said with feeling. "Language," Marcus chided automatically, but his heart wasn't in it. He looked as grim as the rest of them. Elena felt like the ground was tilting beneath her feet. One day. She had 1 day to figure out how to control powers she didn't understand, face enemies who wanted her dead, and somehow fulfill a prophecy that was older than her entire family line. "I need air," she said faintly. Kieran was beside her instantly, his arm around her waist as he guided her to one of the porch chairs. "Breathe, Elena. Just breathe." "Easy for you to say," she gasped. "You're not the one everyone's expecting to save the world." "Hey." Kieran knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. "Look at me." She did, drowning in those storm-gray eyes that had become her anchor in the chaos. "You don't have to save anyone," he said firmly. "The prophecy isn't a mandate. It's a possibility. Whatever happens tomorrow night, you get to choose your own path. Even if that path leads to war between the packs. Even then." His hands tightened on hers. "But Elena, I think you're stronger than you know. The power inside you isn't destructive, it's healing. I can feel it every time you touch me." Elena became aware that the pain in her chest, the tight anxiety that had been building since the bookshop, was easing under Kieran's touch. More than that, she could sense the other's emotions: Owen's scholarly excitement, Saya's protective fierce joy, Marcus's steady strength, and Astrid's carefully controlled hope. "I can feel them," she whispered. "All of them. Their emotions." Kieran's eyes widened. Empathic abilities usually don't develop until after the first full shift. "First shift." Elena's voice cracked. "You mean turning into a wolf?" "That's complicated," Owen said carefully. "Most half-bloods never shift at all. But if you do." He consulted his tablet again. "The prophecy suggests the moon-blessed daughter will have a form unlike any seen before." Before Elena could ask what that meant, Astrid's head snapped up, her nostrils flaring. "We have company." The others immediately went on high alert, forming a protective circle around Elena without seeming to think about it. She could feel their tension, their readiness for violence, and underneath it all, their absolute determination to keep her safe. "How many?" Kieran asked, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. 6. Maybe 7. Astrid's eyes began to glow with an inner light, moving fast through the western approach. "Shadow Ridge." Saya's hand moved to something at her hip, a knife, Elena realized, with a blade that looked like it was made of silver.
"No."
Astrid's expression grew puzzled. "The scent is old. Ancient." Owen cursed under his breath. "The Order." Elena's blood turned to ice. "The Order of the Silver Moon. The ones who wanted her dead. How did they find us so quickly?" Marcus demanded. "The power surge," Kieran said grimly. "It was like sending up a flare." He stood, pulling Elena to her feet. Everyone inside.
Now.
But as they moved toward the cabin door, Elena felt something shift in the air around them. The temperature dropped 10 degrees in as many seconds, and frost began forming on the porch railings despite the mild autumn weather. Too late, Astrid breathed. They came out of the forest like nightmares given form, 7 figures in flowing black robes, their faces hidden beneath deep hoods. They moved with inhuman speed and silence, and where their feet touched the ground, the grass withered and died. "The Order of the Silver Moon greets you, Blackthorne Pack," the lead figure said, its voice echoing strangely, as if it came from somewhere far away. "We have come for the abomination." "You're not welcome here," Kieran snarled, and Elena could see his form beginning to blur around the edges, as if he was fighting not to shift. "This land is under pack protection. No land is beyond our reach when the fate of all shifter kind hangs in the balance." The figure raised one pale hand, and Elena gasped as she felt something try to wrap around her power, trying to smother it. "The girl must die before the crimson moon rises. It is the only way to prevent the prophecies' fulfillment." "Over my dead body," Saya growled, her silver knife gleaming in the moonlight. "That can be arranged." The Order members attacked without warning, moving faster than human eyes could follow. Elena watched in stunned terror as Kieran and his pack met them head-on, the night erupting into violence and snarls, and the clash of silver on claw. But the attackers weren't trying to fight the pack. They were trying to get to her. One of the robed figures broke through the defensive line, heading straight for Elena with hands that glowed with sickly green light. She tried to run, but her feet felt rooted to the spot, paralyzed by fear and the alien power trying to suppress her abilities. "Elena!" Kieran's voice cut through the chaos, but he was pinned down by 2 attackers, unable to reach her. The robed figure was 10 feet away.
5.
Close enough that Elena could see the empty darkness where its face should be. And then something inside her snapped. Power erupted from Elena's core like a supernova, washing over the battlefield in waves of silver light. The attacking figure shrieked and stumbled backward, its robes smoking where the light touched them. Around the yard, the other Order members fell to their knees, clutching their heads and wailing in agony. But Elena wasn't done. The power kept building, kept growing, until she felt like she might explode from the pressure. Light poured from her skin, her eyes, her very soul, and with it came a sound, not the scream from the bookshop, but something else. Something that spoke of ancient authority and unbreakable will. "Enough." The single word rang across the mountains with the force of an avalanche. Birds took flight for miles around, and every supernatural creature within Elena's range of influence, pack member and Order assassin alike, dropped into submission. In the sudden silence that followed, Elena stood wreathed in silver fire, her hair whipping around her face in a wind that touched nothing else. When she spoke again, her voice carried harmonics that definitely weren't human. "You will leave this place. You will not return. And if you ever threaten my pack again, I will show you what true destruction looks like." The Order members scrambled to their feet and fled without a word, moving so fast they were gone in seconds. Elena watched them disappear into the forest before the silver light began to fade, taking her strength with it. She swayed on her feet, overwhelmed by what had just happened. The power was still there, humming under her skin, but it felt different now. Controlled. Like it was finally hers instead of something fighting to get out. "Elena." Kieran was at her side instantly, his hands gentle on her face. "Are you okay?" She looked around at his pack. Her pack, she realized with a start. They were all staring at her with expressions of awe and something that might have been worship. "I think," Elena said slowly, "I'm starting to understand what I am." Kieran's smile was brilliant. "And what's that?" Elena met his eyes, feeling the mate bond sing between them and the power settle into her bones like it had always belonged there. "I'm the moon-blessed daughter," she said simply. "And tomorrow night, I'm going to change everything." The crimson moon was less than 24 hours away, and Elena Ravencrest was finally ready to claim her destiny. Chapter 4. Elena woke to the sound of running water and the scent of pine and bacon. For a moment, she lay still in the unfamiliar bed, watching sunlight filter through curtains she didn't remember closing. Then the events of the previous night came flooding back. The bookshop, the wolves, Kieran, and the terrifying moment when she'd commanded the Order of the Silver Moon to flee. She sat up slowly, testing her body for changes. The wild, chaotic energy that had been coursing through her veins had settled into something steadier, more controlled. She could feel it humming beneath her skin like a second heartbeat, waiting for her call. A soft knock at the door interrupted her inventory. "Elena? Are you awake?" Kieran's voice sent warmth shooting through her chest, the mate bond responding to his proximity. "Come in." He entered carrying a steaming mug of coffee and wearing a soft smile that made her stomach flutter. His dark hair was tousled from sleep, and he'd changed into a flannel shirt that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. "How are you feeling?" he asked, settling on the edge of the bed and offering her the coffee. Elena wrapped her hands around the warm ceramic, breathing in the rich aroma. "Different. Like I'm finally inhabiting my own body instead of borrowing it." She met his eyes. "Is that normal?" "Nothing about you is normal, love." The endearment slipped out naturally, and Elena felt her cheeks warm. But from what Owen's been able to research, power integration usually happens gradually over months or years. "What you did last night?" Kieran shook his head in amazement. "You went from dormant to fully awakened in a matter of hours." "The eclipse is tonight." It wasn't a question. Sunset. His expression grew serious. "Elena, we need to talk about what that means. What you'll be facing." Elena sipped her coffee, using the moment to gather her courage. "Tell me." The crimson moon doesn't just mark the fulfillment of the prophecy, it amplifies supernatural abilities exponentially. Every shifter will be stronger, faster, more aggressive than usual. "And you." He reached out to brush a strand of hair from her face. "Your power will be at its absolute peak." Which means every pack leader, every alpha, every supernatural entity with an agenda will converge on these mountains tonight. They'll want to witness the prophecy's fulfillment or prevent it. Kieran's jaw tightened. Some will try to bind you to their cause. Others will challenge you directly. Elena set down her coffee cup with hands that were surprisingly steady. "How many are we talking about?" Owen estimates at least 12 pack alphas, plus their inner circles. "Maybe more." Kieran's eyes darkened. "The Shadow Ridge pack is definitely coming. Marcus and his followers believe the Moonblessed Daughter should rule through conquest. The Northern Territories are sending representatives. And there are rumors that the European councils have dispatched observers." European councils? Old World packs. Ancient bloodlines that predate the New World settlements by centuries. If they're taking an interest? Kieran's expression was grim. "This is bigger than just North American pack politics." Elena felt the weight of destiny settling on her shoulders again, but this time it didn't feel quite so crushing. The power inside her pulsed with readiness, as if it had been waiting her entire life for this moment. "What do I need to know? To prepare?" Kieran's smile was proud and fierce. "Everything. And we have about 8 hours to teach you." The next few hours passed in a blur of intensive training. Owen had transformed the cabin's living room into a supernatural classroom, with ancient texts spread across every surface and his tablet displaying shifting symbols that made Elena's eyes water if she looked at them too long. "The prophecy has multiple interpretations," he explained, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "The most common translation speaks of a daughter born of 2 worlds who will unite the packs under one moon. But the original text is in Old Norse, and the word unite can also mean bind, control, or dominate. So I could either bring peace or become a tyrant," Elena said dryly. "Essentially, yes." Owen's expression was apologetic. "Which is why some factions want to eliminate you before you can choose either path." While Owen educated her on prophecy interpretations and pack politics, Astrid and Saya took turns teaching her about shifter hierarchy and the complex web of alliances and feuds that had shaped their world for generations. "The most important thing to remember," Astrid said, her pale eyes intense, is that alphas respect strength above all else. They'll test you verbally, physically, psychically. Show weakness, and they'll either dismiss you or try to dominate you. How do I show strength without starting a war? Saya grinned, her expression sharp and predatory. By being stronger than all of them combined. Which, from what we saw last night, shouldn't be a problem. But it was Marcus who provided the most crucial lesson. The older man sat with Elena on the cabin's back porch, overlooking a valley that stretched for miles in every direction. Power isn't about control, he said quietly. It's about choice. Every moment, you'll be choosing how to use what you've been given. The prophecy doesn't define you, Elena. Your choices do. What if I make the wrong choice? Then you make another choice. And another. Marcus's smile was gentle. The beauty of being human, even part human, is that you always get to choose again. As the afternoon wore on, Kieran worked with Elena on controlling and directing her abilities. They started small, lighting candles with a thought, healing minor cuts with a touch, sensing the emotions of the pack members inside the cabin. Feel the power, Kieran instructed, his hands covering hers as they knelt beside a stream behind the cabin. Don't fight it or force it. Let it flow through you like water. Elena closed her eyes and reached for the silver energy that lived beneath her skin. This time, instead of erupting outward in an uncontrolled burst, it responded to her like a faithful pet. She could shape it, direct it, modulate its intensity. Now, Kieran said softly, try to connect with the natural world around you. The trees, the water, the earth itself. Elena extended her awareness beyond her own body and gasped at what she found. Every living thing within a mile radius was connected by threads of energy, a vast web of life that pulsed with its own rhythm. She could feel the ancient consciousness of the mountain itself, patient and enduring. The playful spirits of the water rushing over stones. The quiet wisdom of the towering pines. This is incredible, she whispered. This is just the beginning. Kieran's voice was filled with awe. Elena, I've never seen anything like this. You're not just connecting with nature, you're becoming part of it. When she opened her eyes, Elena saw that every flower within 50 feet had bloomed simultaneously, filling the air with their perfume. Butterflies danced around them in spirals of color, and somewhere in the distance, she could hear wolves singing, not howling, but actually singing in harmonies that brought tears to her eyes. The pack is responding to your awakening, Kieran explained. They can feel your power calling to theirs. Will it be like this tonight? During the eclipse? Kieran's expression grew serious. Tonight will be 100 times more intense. Every supernatural creature for hundreds of miles will feel your power, and they'll all want to test it. As evening approached, the pack began preparing for what Owen grimly called the convergence. Weapons were checked and cleaned, silver blades that could cut through supernatural hide, ancient artifacts that hummed with protective magic, and guns loaded with bullets that made Elena's skin crawl just looking at them. Iron core, silver jacket, blessed by priests from 7 different faiths, Saya explained, noticing Elena's discomfort. They won't kill most supernaturals, but they'll sure as hell slow them down. Elena found herself studying each pack member, trying to memorize their faces. These people, her people, were preparing to risk their lives for her. The thought was both humbling and terrifying. Having second thoughts? Astrid asked, appearing beside her with that silent grace all the shifters seemed to possess. Third and fourth thoughts, Elena admitted. What if I'm not what they expect? What if the prophecy is wrong? Astrid was quiet for a long moment, watching the others prepare. I've been alive for over 2 centuries, she said finally. I've seen empires rise and fall, watched technology transform the world beyond recognition. But I've never seen anything like what happened to you last night. What do you mean? The way the earth itself responded to your awakening. The way even the Order, beings that have existed since before written history, knelt before your power. Astrid turned to look at Elena directly. The prophecy might be wrong about many things, but it's not wrong about you. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold, Elena felt the first stirrings of the eclipse's power. The crimson moon was beginning to rise, and with it, her destiny. Kieran appeared at her side, dressed in black leather and looking every inch the alpha he was. "Are you ready?" Elena looked out at the gathering darkness, knowing that somewhere in those shadows, enemies and allies alike were converging on their location. The prophecy had waited 1,000 years for this moment. The packs had spent generations preparing for this night, and she was about to walk into the center of it all. "No," she said honestly, "but I'm going anyway." Kieran's smile was fierce and proud. "That's my mate." As they prepared to leave the safety of the cabin, Elena caught sight of herself in the hallway mirror. The woman looking back at her bore little resemblance to the quiet bookshop employee she'd been 24 hours ago. Her dark hair seemed to shimmer with silver highlights, her brown eyes held flecks of gold that definitely hadn't been there before, and power radiated from her skin like heat. She was Elena Ravencrest, daughter of two worlds, heir to ancient magic, and fated mate to an alpha who looked at her like she hung the moon. Tonight, she would either unite the shifter packs under the crimson moon or watch their world burn. Either way, she was done hiding. Chapter 5. The ancient stone circle had been carved into the mountainside centuries before Europeans set foot on the continent. Massive granite monoliths rose toward the star-filled sky, their surfaces covered in symbols that seemed to shift and dance in the light of the rising crimson moon. At the center of the circle stood a natural altar, a flat-topped boulder that radiated power like a beacon. Elena stood at the circle's edge, watching as representatives from dozens of packs emerged from the surrounding forest. They came in human form, but there was nothing human about the way they moved. Predators acknowledging other predators, alphas taking the measure of potential rivals. 12 major packs confirmed, Owen murmured beside her, consulting his tablet, plus observers from at least 6 minor territories. His voice dropped to a whisper. And 3 European delegates. Elena spotted them immediately, 3 figures in expensive suits who moved with the contained violence of apex predators. Unlike the North American alphas, who radiated raw power and barely controlled wildness, these newcomers carried themselves with the cold authority of beings who had ruled for millennia. Old world royalty, Astrid explained, her pale eyes wary. They don't usually involve themselves in New World affairs unless something threatens the global balance of power. Which means they see me as a threat, Elena said. Or as an opportunity. Kieran's voice was tight with tension. He hadn't left her side since they'd arrived at the circle, and Elena could feel his protective instincts warring with his respect for her autonomy. Either way, they'll want to test you. The crowd was arranging itself according to some complex hierarchy Elena didn't understand. The most powerful alphas claimed positions closest to the altar, while lesser pack leaders and their entourages spread outward in concentric rings. She could feel their eyes on her, some curious, some hostile, some calculating. There. Saya nodded toward a group of 7 wolves who radiated menace like a toxic cloud. Shadow Ridge Pack. The big one in front is Marcus. Not our Marcus, the other one. The one who wants to chain you to his will. The Shadow Ridge Alpha was massive even in human form, with silver-streaked hair and scars that told stories of countless battles. When his yellow eyes fixed on Elena, she felt the weight of his hunger. Not sexual, but something far more dangerous. He wanted her power, wanted to possess and control what she represented. And over there, Owen added quietly, representatives from the Moonfall Collective. They believe the prophecy should be interpreted metaphorically, not literally. They think you're either a fraud or dangerously deluded. Elena studied the skeptical faces of the Moonfall delegates. Unlike the Shadow Ridge Wolves, who looked at her with predatory interest, these shifters regarded her with cool dismissal. Their disbelief might be less immediately threatening than Shadow Ridge's hunger, but it was no less dangerous. How many of them actually want to help me? Elena asked. Kieran's expression was grim. Maybe a third. The rest either want to use you, control you, or prove you're not what the prophecy promised. As if summoned by their conversation, a new group entered the circle. Elena felt their presence before she saw them, a cold absence of warmth that made her power recoil instinctively. When they stepped into the moonlight, she saw why. The Order of the Silver Moon had come. Unlike their attack the night before, These weren't the robed foot soldiers Elena had faced at the cabin. These were the Order's true representatives, beings so old and powerful that reality seemed to bend around them. They wore human shapes, but there was something fundamentally wrong about them, as if they were wearing masks that didn't quite fit. "They shouldn't be able to enter the circle," Marcus whispered, his scarred hands clenching into fists. The wards. The wards were designed to keep out those who mean harm, the lead Order representative said, its voice carrying across the circle with unnatural clarity. "We mean no harm to anyone except the abomination that threatens our very existence." The temperature in the stone circle dropped 20 degrees. Frost began forming on the ancient symbols carved into the monoliths, and several of the younger pack members shifted nervously. "You are not welcome here," Kieran snarled, stepping forward. Power radiated from him in waves, and Elena could see his human form beginning to blur around the edges. "Peace, young Alpha." One of the European delegates spoke for the first time, his accent crisp and aristocratic. "The Order has as much right to witness tonight's events as any of us. The prophecy concerns all supernatural beings, not just shifters." Lord Blackwood speaks wisdom. The Order representative inclined its head respectfully toward the European delegate. "We seek only to prevent a catastrophe that would doom shifter and human alike." Elena felt rage building in her chest, not the wild, uncontrolled fury of her early awakenings, but something colder and more focused. These beings had spent decades hunting her bloodline, murdering anyone who might carry the gift. They had driven her mother into exile and forced Elena to live a lie for 24 years. "You're afraid," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the circle. Every conversation stopped. Every eye turned to her. "You call me an abomination, but what you really fear is change. You've built your power on keeping the supernatural world divided and afraid, and you know that if the packs unite, your age of manipulation is over." The Order representative tilted its head, studying her with eyes that reflected moonlight like a predator's. "Clever. But cleverness without wisdom is merely another form of foolishness. You have lived as a human for 24 years, child. What do you know of the delicate balance that keeps our world separate? What understanding do you have of the consequences that would follow if that balance were shattered?" "I know that balance built on fear and division isn't balance at all," Elena replied steadily. "It's oppression wearing a prettier name." A murmur ran through the assembled packs, some approving, others uncertain. Elena could feel the weight of their attention, their judgment, their hope and fear pressing against her awareness. The Shadow Ridge Alpha chose that moment to step forward. "Enough talk," Marcus snarled, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. "If the girl claims to be the Moonblessed daughter, let her prove it. I challenge her to single combat under the Crimson Moon." Elena's blood turned to ice. She'd learned enough about pack politics to know what this meant, a formal challenge that she couldn't refuse without losing all credibility with the assembled alphas. "The challenged party has the right to choose the nature of the combat," Lord Blackwood said smoothly. "Will it be physical prowess, mental acuity, or—" His smile was razor-sharp. "A contest of power?" Elena could feel Kieran's tension like a living thing beside her. They trained for hours, but nothing could have prepared her for this moment, standing before the most powerful supernatural beings in North America while a blood-red moon painted everything the color of violence. "Power," she said clearly. "Let's settle this once and for all." The circle erupted in excited whispers and growls of anticipation. The assembled packs began spreading outward, giving the combatants room while ensuring they had clear views of what was about to unfold. Marcus smiled, revealing teeth that were slightly too sharp to be human. "Excellent. The terms are simple. First to yield or fall unconscious loses. The winner's interpretation of the prophecy becomes law among all assembled packs." Elena felt her power stirring in response to the formal challenge, silver energy beginning to coil beneath her skin. "And if I win? Then the Shadow Ridge pack acknowledges you as the true Moonblessed daughter and pledges our loyalty to your cause." Marcus's yellow eyes glowed with predatory satisfaction. "But when you lose, you submit to my authority. Your power, your future, your very soul become mine to command. The stakes couldn't be higher. Elena looked around the circle, seeing the hunger in some faces, skepticism in others, and desperate hope in a precious few. These people, these packs, had waited generations for this moment. The choices she made tonight would echo through shifter history for centuries to come. I accept your terms, Elena said. As she walked toward the center of the circle, toward the ancient altar where moonlight pooled like liquid silver, Elena felt the mate bond singing between her and Kieran. His faith in her was absolute, unshakable, and it gave her strength she hadn't known she possessed. The crimson moon reached its zenith, and every supernatural being in the circle felt the surge of power that accompanied it. But for Elena, it was different. The eclipse didn't just amplify her abilities, it completed them. For the first time since her awakening, she felt whole. Marcus began to shift, his human form melting and reforming into something larger, darker, and infinitely more dangerous. The wolf that emerged was the size of a small horse, with silver-tipped fur and eyes like molten gold. Power radiated from him in waves that made the very air shimmer. Elena remained human, but she let her power show. Silver light began pouring from her skin, and where it touched the ancient stones, symbols that had been carved millennia ago began to glow with answering radiance. The mountain itself seemed to hold its breath. "Come then, little daughter," Marcus growled, his voice now more beast than man. "Show me what power runs in your mongrel blood." Elena smiled, and for the first time since this nightmare began, she felt no fear at all. Gladly. When their powers collided, the very foundations of the mountain shook, and every being in the stone circle knew they were witnessing the moment that would reshape their world forever. Chapter 6. The collision of their powers sent shockwaves through the stone circle that could be felt for miles. Marcus struck first, launching himself across the altar with supernatural speed, his massive wolf form wreathed in shadows that seemed to devour light itself. His power was ancient, primal, the accumulated strength of countless battles and decades of dominance. Elena didn't move. Instead, she let her power flow outward like a tide of silver fire, meeting his attack head-on. The moment their energies touched, the ancient symbols carved into the monoliths blazed to life, casting the entire circle in dancing patterns of light and shadow. Marcus hit her barrier and bounced back as if he'd struck a wall of solid steel. He landed hard, his massive form skidding across the stone, but he was back on his feet in seconds, yellow eyes burning with fury and disbelief. "Impossible," he snarled. "No untrained half-blood could." His words cut off as Elena finally moved. She stepped forward, and with each step, flowers bloomed in the cracks between the ancient stones. The air around her shimmered with power so pure and concentrated that several of the watching pack members fell to their knees, overwhelmed by the sheer force of her presence. "You're thinking like an alpha," Elena said, her voice carrying clearly across the circle despite its gentle tone. "Like someone who believes power comes from domination, from taking what you want by force." She gestured to the assembled packs, to the hundreds of eyes watching their confrontation. But that's not what this is about. Marcus charged again, this time calling up the full might of his pack bonds. Elena could feel the other Shadow Ridge wolves lending him their strength, their combined power flowing into their alpha like tributaries feeding a river. The attack came not just as physical force but as pure dominance, an attempt to crush her will and make her submit through overwhelming authority. Elena caught the assault in her bare hands. Power crackled between her fingers like caged lightning as she held Marcus's energy, not fighting it but simply containing it. The massive wolf's momentum carried him forward until he was inches from her face, his fangs bared and his eyes wild with frustrated rage. "Power isn't about control," Elena said softly, meeting his gaze without flinching. "It's about choice. And connection. And understanding that true strength comes from unity, not conquest." She released his power back to him, but transformed. Where his energy had been dark and grasping, it now carried threads of silver light that sang with harmony rather than discord. Marcus staggered backward, confusion replacing fury as he felt his own power altered, elevated, made cleaner somehow. "What did you do?" he demanded. "I showed you what you could be," Elena replied. "What we all could be if we stopped fighting each other long enough to remember why the prophecy exists in the first place." She turned to address the entire assembly, her voice carrying to every corner of the stone circle. "You've all spent so long preparing for war that you've forgotten what peace might look like. The prophecy doesn't speak of a conqueror, it speaks of a healer. Someone who can mend the rifts that have divided the packs for generations." "Pretty words," sneered one of the Moonfall representatives. "But words don't prove anything. If you claim to be the Moonblessed daughter, demonstrate the power the prophecy promises." Elena smiled, and the expression was radiant with confidence. "Very well." She raised her hands toward the crimson moon, and her power reached out to touch every supernatural being in the circle. Not to dominate or control, but to connect, to heal, to show them what they all could be if they chose unity over division. The effect was immediate and profound. Pack bonds that had been weakened by years of conflict suddenly blazed with renewed strength. Old wounds, physical, emotional, spiritual, began to close as Elena's healing energy flowed through the assembled crowd. Enemies who had spent decades nursing grudges found their hatred melting away, replaced by understanding and the memory of what they'd once meant to each other. But more than that, Elena began weaving new connections. Bonds of fellowship and mutual respect between packs that had never trusted each other. Links of understanding between alphas who had spent their lives competing for dominance. A vast network of silver threads that connected every supernatural being in the circle to every other. "This is what the prophecy meant," Elena said, her voice filled with wonder as she felt the connections taking hold. Not one pack dominating all others, but all packs united as one. A family instead of an army. The response was overwhelming. Wolves began howling, not in challenge or aggression, but in harmony. The sound rose and fell in complex melodies that spoke of pack bonds and shared purpose, of strength found in unity rather than conquest. Even Marcus, still in his massive wolf form, found himself adding his voice to the song. The Shadow Ridge Alpha's expression had transformed from fury to amazement as he felt the network of connections Elena was weaving. For the first time in decades, he wasn't alone at the top of a rigid hierarchy. He was part of something larger and more beautiful than anything he'd ever imagined. But not everyone was willing to embrace the change. "Enough!" The Order representative's voice cut through the harmony like a blade, and the temperature in the circle plummeted. Ice began forming on the stones, and the connections Elena had been weaving flickered as the ancient being's power pressed against her own. "You see now why she must be destroyed," the creature said, addressing the European delegates. "She doesn't seek to rule through strength. She seeks to eliminate the natural order entirely. If the packs unite under her influence, if the barriers between human and supernatural worlds dissolve." "Chaos," Lord Blackwood finished, his aristocratic features troubled. "The exposure of our kind to human knowledge. War between species. The end of everything we've worked to preserve." Elena felt the mood in the circle shifting as fear began to override the wonder of the connections she'd forged. The Order had chosen their moment perfectly, striking when the assembled packs were most vulnerable to doubt. "Is that what you all want?" she asked, her voice steady despite the growing opposition. "To spend another 1,000 years hiding in the shadows, pretending you don't exist? Watching your children grow up ashamed of what they are?" "Better shame than extinction," the Order representative hissed. "Humans fear what they don't understand, child. And they destroy what they fear." "Some do," Elena agreed. "But others learn. Others adapt. Others choose love over fear." She looked around the circle, meeting the eyes of pack leaders and their followers alike. "My mother was human, and she loved my father knowing exactly what he was. She died protecting their daughter, protecting me, because she believed our two worlds could coexist." The Order representative laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Your mother was a fool who paid for her idealism with her life. And you are an even greater fool if you think her death was noble rather than senseless. Rage flared in Elena's chest, white-hot and purifying. How dare this creature mock her mother's sacrifice? How dare it twist love into weakness, hope into foolishness? But as the anger built, Elena felt something else stirring in the depths of her power. Something vast and ancient and infinitely patient. The voice of the mountain itself, of the earth beneath her feet, of the moon burning crimson overhead. Show them, the voice whispered. Show them what you truly are. Elena let her human facade fall away. Power erupted from her core in waves that visible to every eye in the circle. Silver fire wreathed her form, and her hair whipped around her face in winds that touched nothing else. But more than that, her very presence began to change. She grew taller, more luminous, more essentially real than anything around her. Wings of pure light unfurled from her shoulders, not the feathered wings of birds, but constructs of energy that sang with harmonics that made reality itself vibrate in sympathy. Her eyes became pools of liquid starlight, and when she spoke, her voice carried the authority of ancient prophecy given form. I am Elena Ravencrest, she declared, and every word rang with power that made the stone circle tremble. Daughter of two worlds, heir to the moon-blessed bloodline, and bridge between all that was and all that could be. I am not here to rule over you or hide from the world. I am here to show you that there is another path. The Order representative stumbled backward, its perfect composure finally cracking. Impossible. The bloodline was cleansed. We destroyed every last. You destroyed my grandmother, Elena said, her transformed voice carrying notes of grief and fury that made several pack members whimper in sympathy. You drove my mother into exile. You spent decades hunting shadows, so afraid of change that you became the very monsters you claimed to oppose. She raised one hand, and power gathered around it like a miniature star. But you cannot kill an idea whose time has come. You cannot murder hope itself. The assembled packs watched in stunned silence as Elena's power continued to build. This wasn't the wild, uncontrolled energy of her early awakenings. This was something focused, purposeful, infinitely more dangerous than raw strength. Choose, Elena said, addressing every being in the circle. Choose fear or hope. Choose division or unity. Choose the shadows or the light. Her eyes fixed on the Order representative. But choose quickly. Because the age of hiding is ending, whether you embrace it or not. The crimson moon reached the peak of its eclipse, and every supernatural being in the circle felt their power surge in response. But Elena's energy didn't just increase, it transcended, becoming something beyond mortal understanding. When she smiled, the expression held promises of wonders and terrors in equal measure. The prophecy has been fulfilled, she said simply. Now we begin writing the next chapter of history. Chapter 7. The silence that followed Elena's declarations stretched like a held breath. In the crimson light of the eclipsed moon, the assembled supernatural beings stood frozen between awe and terror, watching the impossible creature of light and power that had once been a quiet bookshop employee. Then Lord Blackwood began to laugh. The sound was rich and genuinely amused, cutting through the tension like a warm knife through butter. The ancient European delegate stepped forward, his movements fluid and predatory, but there was no hostility in his approach, only fascination. Magnificent, he said, his aristocratic voice carrying clearly across the circle. In 8 centuries of existence, I have never seen anything quite so audacious. His pale eyes fixed on Elena's transformed face. You propose to overturn the fundamental order of our world based on the idealistic notion that humans and supernaturals can coexist peacefully. Not based on idealism, Elena replied, her voice still carrying those impossible harmonics that made reality shiver. Based on love. My parents proved it was possible. Others have done the same throughout history. They've just had to hide their success. And you believe, Lord Blackwood continued, that revealing our existence will lead to acceptance rather than persecution? That humans will embrace their predators as neighbors and friends? Elena's wings of light pulsed gently, and her smile held depths of compassion that made several pack members look away in overwhelmed awe. I believe that most humans are capable of growth, just as most supernaturals are capable of restraint. The fear between our worlds exists because we've never tried to bridge the gap. We've only ever hidden or hunted. The Order representative snarled, its perfect human mask beginning to slip. Naive child. Humans have spent millennia perfecting the art of destroying what they don't understand. They will hunt us to extinction given the chance. Some will try, Elena agreed calmly. Just as some supernaturals have spent millennia hunting humans for sport. Fear and hatred exist on both sides. She spread her luminous wings wider, and power rippled outward in waves of healing warmth. But fear can be overcome. Hatred can be healed. Understanding can be taught. Marcus, still in his massive wolf form, padded closer to the altar. The Shadow Ridge Alpha's yellow eyes were no longer filled with predatory hunger. They held something Elena had never expected to see. Wonder. You healed my pack bonds, he said, his voice a rumbling growl. Connections that have been strained for decades suddenly run clean and strong. How? By showing you what they could be instead of what they were, Elena replied. By choosing to trust instead of dominate. Trust. Marcus repeated the word like he was tasting something foreign. You defeated me without violence. Without humiliation. Without breaking my strength or my pride. His massive head tilted. Why? Elena's expression softened. Because breaking you wouldn't have proven anything except that I was stronger. But strength without compassion is just another form of tyranny. She gestured to the assembled packs. You've all spent so long fighting each other that you've forgotten you're fighting for the same things. Safety for your families, freedom to live as you are, hope for a better future. Pretty words, one of the Moonfall representatives called out. But words don't change centuries of precedent. Supernaturals and humans are natural enemies. That's not hatred, that's biology. Elena turned her starlight gaze toward the skeptical Alpha. Is it? Or is it learned behavior passed down through generations of fear? She raised one hand, and images began forming in the air above the altar, memories drawn from the collective unconscious of every being in the circle. The assembled crowd watched in stunned silence as Elena showed them moments from history they'd never seen. Humans and shapeshifters working together during natural disasters. Witches and werewolves sharing knowledge to heal plagues. Vampires and humans forming unlikely friendships that lasted centuries. The alliances existed, Elena said softly. The cooperation happened, but it was always secret, always hidden, always temporary. Because both sides were taught that coexistence was impossible. Because coexistence is impossible. The Order representative's composure finally shattered completely. Power erupted from the ancient being, not the clean silver energy that Elena wielded, but something dark and hungry that made the very air recoil. You think yourself wise, child, but you are leading us all to destruction. I will not allow. The creature's words cut off abruptly as Kieran stepped between it and Elena. The Blackthorne Alpha had been silent throughout the confrontation, letting his mate prove herself to the assembled packs. But now his protective instincts had finally overridden his restraint. You will not threaten my mate, he growled, power radiating from him in waves that made even Lord Blackwood step back respectfully. Not in my territory. Not under my protection. The Order representative laughed, a sound like breaking bones. Your protection? Against me? It began to grow, its human facade melting away to reveal something ancient and terrible. I am older than your bloodline, young Alpha. I was destroying threats to the supernatural world when your ancestors were still learning to walk upright. And yet, Elena said quietly, stepping up beside Kieran, you're still afraid of one untrained half-blood with idealistic notions. The insult hit home. The Order creature turned its attention back to Elena, and she could feel the weight of its hatred like a physical force. You want to see what your revolution will cost? Very well. Let me show you what humans do to monsters they can't control. Power lashed out from the ancient being, not aimed at Elena, but at the assembled packs. Images flooded their minds, visions of persecution and genocide, of supernatural beings hunted down and slaughtered by human mobs armed with silver and fire and righteous fury. Several pack members cried out in terror as the visions overwhelmed them. Elena felt their fears spike, felt the network of connections she'd woven beginning to fray under the assault of manufactured terror. "Stop," she commanded, but the Order representative only intensified its psychic attack. "See how quickly your unity crumbles," it taunted. "See how easily fear conquers hope. This is what will happen when humans learn of our existence. This is why the old ways must be preserved." Elena felt her rage building again, but this time she didn't fight it. Instead, she let it transform into something else. Not fury, but fierce protective love for every being the creature was tormenting. "You're right," she said, her voice carrying notes of power that made the mountain itself tremble. "Fear is easier than hope. Hatred is simpler than understanding. Division is more familiar than unity." She began to rise, her feet leaving the ground as power lifted her toward the crimson moon. "But easy and simple and familiar are not the same as right. And I refuse to let fear write the future." Elena spread her wings wide and let her full power manifest. Not the controlled demonstrations she'd shown before, but everything, every ounce of inherited magic, every drop of supernatural potential, every spark of divine possibility that flowed in her mixed blood. The result was beyond magnificent. It was transcendent. Light poured from Elena's form in cascades of silver fire that painted the entire mountainside in radiance brighter than day. Her power reached out to touch every supernatural being within 50 miles, not to dominate or control, but to heal and strengthen and inspire. Bonds that had been broken for generations suddenly blazed back to life. Ancient wounds closed in seconds. Poisoned grudges dissolved like shadows before sunrise. And underneath it all, Elena wove new connections, not just between the packs in the circle, but between every supernatural community across the continent. For the first time in over 1,000 years, every werewolf, every vampire, every witch and fae and spirit-touched being felt the presence of every other. They were no longer isolated communities struggling alone. They were part of something vast and wonderful and unbreakably strong. "This is what the prophecy promised," Elena said, her voice reaching every mind she touched. "Not conquest, but connection. Not dominance, but harmony. Not one ruler over many subjects, but one family with many members." The Order representative shrieked as Elena's power washed over it, burning away the shadows it had wrapped around itself like armor. For the first time in millennia, the ancient creature felt hope against its will, felt the possibility of a world where fear didn't rule every decision. "Impossible," it gasped. "This cannot be sustained. The divisions exist for good reason. Without the balance of separation." "The balance was never about separation," Elena interrupted gently. "It was about choice. The choice to trust instead of fear. The choice to love instead of hate. The choice to build instead of destroy." She descended slowly until her feet touched the altar stone again. As she did, her form began to shift back toward human appearance, though she retained the silver highlights in her hair and the starlight depths of her eyes. "I'm not asking any of you to reveal yourselves tomorrow," she said, addressing the assembled packs directly. "I'm not demanding an end to secrecy or caution. What I'm offering is the possibility of something better. A future where our children don't have to choose between their supernatural heritage and their human hearts." Lord Blackwood stepped forward, his expression thoughtful. "And if the humans react with violence? If exposure leads to war?" Elena's smile was radiant with confidence. "Then we'll face it together. All of us. United instead of divided, strong instead of scattered." She gestured to the connection she'd forged, still glowing silver in the crimson moonlight. "That's what the prophecy was really about, not preventing change, but ensuring we're strong enough to survive it." The European delegate studied her for a long moment, then slowly inclined his head. "The old world has spent centuries watching the new world's experiments with cautious interest. Perhaps it is time for a new experiment indeed." One by one, the pack alphas began to step forward. Marcus was first, his massive wolf form padding to the altar to press his great head against Elena's hand in a gesture of submission and respect. The Moonfall representatives followed, their skepticism replaced by wondering hope. Even some of the minor pack leaders who had hung back in uncertainty now approached to offer their allegiance. But it was Kieran's reaction that made Elena's heart soar. Her mate's storm-gray eyes blazed with pride and love and absolute faith as he knelt before her, not in submission, but in recognition of what she had accomplished. "My Luna," he said simply. "My mate. My partner in all things." Elena's power pulsed with joy as she helped him to his feet. "Always," she promised. "In this world, and whatever comes next." As the crimson moon began its descent toward dawn, Elena looked out at the faces surrounding her, supernatural beings who had spent their lives in hiding, now connected by bonds of trust and mutual purpose. The future was uncertain, full of challenges and potential dangers. But for the first time in 1,000 years, it was also full of hope. Chapter 8. The first pale fingers of dawn were creeping over the mountain peaks when Elena finally allowed herself to truly breathe. The crimson moon eclipse was ending, taking with it the supernatural surge that had made her transformation possible. But the connections she'd forged, those remained, glowing like silver threads in her enhanced perception. Most of the assembled packs had departed, returning to their territories with pledges of cooperation and promises to begin the careful work of building trust between previously hostile communities. The stone circle, which had witnessed centuries of conflict and division, now hummed with residual energy from the night's unprecedented unity. Elena sat on the altar stone, her legs dangling like a child's, watching Kieran coordinate the final departures with Marcus and Astrid. Even in the growing daylight, she could feel the mate bond singing between them, stronger now, deeper, threaded through with the power she'd awakened and the future they'd chosen together. "You look thoughtful," Owen said, approaching with his tablet and that gentle smile that had become so familiar. "Regretting anything about tonight?" Elena considered the question seriously. Her entire world had changed in the space of a few hours. She'd gone from hiding her nature to announcing it to the most powerful supernatural beings in North America. She'd challenged millennia of precedent and somehow convinced ancient alphas to embrace radical change. "No," she said finally, "though I'm terrified about what comes next." "Good," Saya said, appearing beside them with her characteristic silent grace. "Terror keeps you sharp. Overconfidence gets you killed." The enforcer's expression was unusually serious. "What you did tonight, the connections you forged, they're not going to be easy to maintain. Some of those packs have been enemies for generations. Old habits die hard." Elena nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. "I know, but the foundation is there now. The possibility exists. That's more than we had yesterday." The European delegates were particularly impressed, Marcus added, joining their small group. The older man looked tired but pleased. "Lord Blackwood asked me to convey his formal invitation for you to address the Continental Assembly next spring." "The what now?" Elena asked weakly. Owen's eyes lit up with scholarly excitement. "The Continental Assembly only convenes once every 50 years, and only for matters of global supernatural significance. If they're willing to hear your proposal for gradual revelation..." He trailed off, shaking his head in amazement. "Elena, you might actually be able to change the entire supernatural world." Might being the operative word, Elena thought. The euphoria of the night's success was beginning to fade, replaced by a clearer understanding of the magnitude of what she'd set in motion. "What about the order?" she asked, looking around the circle. The ancient beings had vanished sometime during the mass exodus, leaving behind only the lingering chill of their displeasure. "Gone for now," Astrid said, her pale eyes scanning the forest edge with predatory alertness. "But not defeated. They've spent millennia maintaining the status quo. They won't give up easily." Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. The Order representative's hatred had been almost tangible, a toxic presence that made her power recoil instinctively. And if beings that ancient and powerful decided she was too dangerous to live, hey. Kieran appeared at her side, as if summoned by her troubled thoughts. His hands were warm on her shoulders, and the mate bond hummed with comfort and reassurance. "What's wrong?" "Everything," Elena said honestly. "I just committed myself to revolutionizing supernatural society, made enemies of beings older than written history, and promised to unite communities that have been trying to kill each other since before I was born." She leaned into his warmth. "Oh, and apparently I need to give a speech to European vampire lords next spring." Kieran's laugh was rich and warm. "When you put it like that, it does sound a bit overwhelming." "A bit," Elena squeaked. "Elena." Kieran cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his storm-gray eyes. "Do you know what I felt when you stood up to that order creature? When you chose to heal instead of destroy, to connect instead of conquer?" She shook her head, not trusting her voice. "Pride," he said simply. "Absolute, overwhelming pride in the woman who chose me as her mate. And certainty, bone-deep, unshakable certainty, that you're going to change the world for the better." "You can't know that." "I can, because I know you." His thumb traced along her cheekbone, and Elena's entire body responded to the gentle touch. "You've spent your whole life thinking you were ordinary, unremarkable, invisible. But you were never any of those things. You were just waiting for the right moment to show the world who you really are." Elena felt tears pricking at her eyes, not from sadness, but from the sheer overwhelming force of being seen, truly seen, for everything she was and could become. "I love you," she whispered, the words falling from her lips before she could think to hold them back. Kieran's smile was brilliant, transforming his entire face. "I love you too, Elena Ravencrest. My mate, my Luna, my partner in revolution." When he kissed her, Elena felt the mate bond flare to life between them, stronger and more complex than ever before. She could feel his emotions as clearly as her own, love and pride and absolute faith in their shared future. But underneath those surface feelings, she sensed something deeper, a recognition that went beyond the supernatural connection, beyond even the prophecy that had brought them together. They chose each other. Not because fate demanded it or because magic compelled it, but because they looked at each other and decided that whatever came next, they wanted to face it together. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Elena realized that the others had tactfully withdrawn, giving them privacy for this moment of connection. She could sense them nearby, her pack, her family, but they were far enough away to allow the mates their intimacy. "So, what happens now?" Elena asked, settling more comfortably against Kieran's side as they watched the sun paint the mountains in shades of gold and rose. "Now we go home," Kieran said. "We rest, we plan, and we start the slow work of building the future you envisioned." Home. Elena tested the word, feeling how it settled in her chest. A week ago, home had been a cramped apartment above a noisy street, filled with second-hand furniture and the constant anxiety of bills she could barely afford. Now, "Where's home?" she asked. Kieran's smile was soft and infinitely tender. "Wherever you are. Though I should probably mention that the pack has a rather nice compound about 50 miles from here. Cabins, training facilities, a library that Owen has been expanding for decades." His expression grew slightly uncertain. "If you'd like to see it. If you want to stay." Elena's heart clenched at the careful hope in his voice. Even now, even after everything they'd shared, he was giving her the choice. Not assuming she'd want to leave her human life behind completely, not taking her presence in his world for granted. It was exactly what she needed to know, that she was making the right decision. "I'd love to see it," she said. "I'd love to stay. Though we should probably figure out what to do about my job at the bookshop. And my apartment lease. And my entire human existence. We'll figure it out," Kieran promised. "Together." The word sent warmth spreading through Elena's chest. Together. Not alone. The way she'd faced every challenge for most of her adult life. Not carrying the weight of impossible expectations by herself. Together, with a mate who saw her strength and a pack that had already accepted her as family. "Kieran," she said as they prepared to leave the sacred circle. Yes. When all this is over, the Continental Assembly, the gradual revelation, building bridges between our worlds. What do you want? For us, I mean, for our future. Kieran was quiet for a long moment, his gray eyes distant as he considered the question. When he spoke, his voice was soft but certain. I want to wake up beside you every morning for the rest of our very long lives. I want to watch you change the world and be proud that I get to call you mine. I want to raise children who grow up knowing they never have to choose between their human hearts and their supernatural souls. He turned to look at her directly. I want to love you through every challenge, every triumph, every ordinary moment in between. Elena felt her breath catch. Children? If you want them. When you're ready. Kieran's expression grew slightly anxious. I know it's early to be talking about. I want them, Elena interrupted, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. Someday. When the world is a little safer for beings like us. Then we'll make it safer, Kieran said simply. That's what alphas do. We protect our pack, our territory, our family. And you, my brilliant mate, are going to teach us all how to protect everyone. As they walked away from the stone circle hand in hand, Elena felt the silver threads of connection she'd woven pulsing with life and possibility. The work ahead would be difficult, dangerous, potentially deadly. But for the first time in her life, she wasn't facing an uncertain future alone. She had a mate who loved her, a pack that had chosen her, and a power that could heal instead of harm. Most importantly, she had hope, not just for herself, but for every supernatural being who had ever felt caught between worlds. The prophecy had been fulfilled, but Elena's real story was just beginning. Behind them, the last of the crimson light faded from the moon, leaving only the warm gold of sunrise and the promise of a new day. Chapter 9. 3 weeks later, Elena stood on the wraparound porch of what was now her home, watching the sunrise paint the valley in shades of amber and rose. The Blackthorne Pack compound was everything Kieran had promised and more, a collection of beautifully crafted log cabins nestled in a hidden valley, connected by stone paths and surrounded by gardens that bloomed with supernatural vigor. Her enhanced senses picked up the familiar sounds of pack life beginning, the splash of someone diving into the natural hot springs, the rhythmic thwack of Saya practicing with her throwing knives, Owen's excited voice as he discovered something new in his research. Home sounds. Family sounds. It still amazed her how quickly she'd adapted to this new life. The transition from her cramped apartment to pack living had been surprisingly smooth, helped by the fact that every pack member seemed determined to make her feel welcome. They'd given her space when she needed it, guidance when she asked for it, and unconditional acceptance that she was still learning to trust. You're up early, Kieran said, appearing beside her with 2 steaming mugs of coffee. He developed an uncanny ability to sense when she needed caffeine, among other things. Couldn't sleep, Elena admitted, accepting the mug gratefully. Too much to think about. It was true. The aftermath of the Crimson Moon convergence had been a whirlwind of activity. Pack leaders from across the continent had been calling to report on the status of their new alliances. Several long-standing territorial disputes had been resolved practically overnight, as former enemies found themselves unable to sustain hatred in the face of the connections Elena had forged. But not all the news had been positive. Any word from the Northern Territories? She asked. Kieran's expression grew troubled. Astrid called an hour ago. The Frost Peak Pack is struggling with the new bonds. Their alpha is old school, believes that cooperation is weakness. He's been trying to sever the connections you made. Elena felt a pang of worry. She'd known that not every pack would embrace the changes enthusiastically, but she'd hoped the benefits would be obvious enough to overcome resistance. Can he break them? Not permanently. But he can damage them, weaken them until they're barely functional. Kieran moved closer, his warmth a comfort against the morning chill. Owen thinks the alpha might be afraid of losing his authority if his pack has strong bonds with others. Elena sighed, wrapping her free hand around his arm. Fear again. It always comes back to fear. Which is why what you're building is so important, a new voice said. They turned to see Marcus approaching, his scarred face serious but not unkind. Change doesn't happen overnight, little sister. Even revolutionary change takes time to root properly. The older man had become an unexpected mentor in the weeks since the convergence. His experience leading pack security operations, combined with his newfound understanding of Elena's vision, made him invaluable in planning their next steps. The Continental Assembly invitation is confirmed, Marcus continued, settling into one of the porch chairs. Lord Blackwood's formal invitation arrived this morning, along with safe passage guarantees from 14 European territories. Elena felt her stomach clench with familiar anxiety. The thought of addressing the oldest and most powerful supernatural authorities in the world was terrifying enough, without the added pressure of representing an entirely new philosophy of human supernatural relations. "I still can't believe they want to hear from me," she said. "You changed the supernatural landscape of an entire continent in one night," Kieran pointed out. "Of course they want to hear from you. The question is whether they want to listen." It was a fair distinction. Interest and openness were very different things, and Elena had learned enough about old-world politics to know that ancient authorities didn't embrace change easily. "There's something else," Marcus said, his tone growing more serious. "Intelligence from our contacts in the Order of the Silver Moon." Elena's coffee suddenly tasted bitter. "What kind of intelligence?" "They're regrouping. The humiliation at the convergence has made them more dangerous, not less. Our sources suggest they're planning something for the Continental Assembly." Marcus met her eyes directly. "They can't attack you openly, too many witnesses, too much political fallout. But if they can discredit you, prove that your vision of cooperation is naive or dangerous, they can turn the European authorities against everything I'm trying to build," Elena finished. "Exactly." Elena set down her coffee mug with hands that were steadier than she felt. 3 weeks of relative peace, and she'd almost let herself believe the worst was over. But the Order had centuries of experience in political manipulation. They wouldn't need violence to destroy her if they could convince the Continental Assembly that she represented a threat to supernatural secrecy. "What do we know about their plan?" "Not enough," Marcus admitted. "But whatever it is, they'll wait until you're most vulnerable. Probably during your address to the Assembly. When I'm standing in front of the most powerful supernatural beings in Europe, making the case for radical change." Elena laughed, but there was no humor in it. Perfect timing. Kieran's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. "You won't be alone. I'll be there, and so will representatives from every pack that pledged their support." "Will that be enough?" "It will have to be," Kieran said simply. "Because the alternative is letting fear win. And we've come too far to surrender now." As if summoned by their conversation, Owen appeared in the doorway, his tablet clutched in his hands and his brown eyes bright with excitement. "Elena, you need to see this," he said, practically vibrating with enthusiasm. "I've been analyzing the network effects of the connections you forged, and the implications are, well, they're extraordinary." He set his tablet on the porch table, displaying a complex diagram that looked like a cross between a family tree and a constellation map. Bright lines connected hundreds of points of light, creating patterns that pulsed with their own rhythm. "This is the current state of the interpack connections," Owen explained. "Look at the data flow. Information, resources, even emotional support, they're all moving through the network faster and more efficiently than ever before. Pack territories that were struggling with rogue supernatural threats are getting help from neighbors who were enemies just weeks ago." Elena studied the diagram, feeling a warm glow of satisfaction as she recognized the connections she'd woven. "It's working. Better than working. It's evolving." Owen switched to a different view, showing projected growth patterns. "The bonds you created are strengthening themselves, developing new pathways, becoming more resilient. At this rate, within a year we could have a continental supernatural community that's more unified than anything in recorded history. And the Order knows it," Marcus said grimly. "Which is why they're getting desperate." Elena felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders, but this time it didn't feel quite so crushing. Looking at Owen's data, seeing the tangible proof that her vision was working, gave her strength she hadn't known she possessed. Then we make sure they don't succeed, she said firmly. Whatever they're planning for the Continental Assembly, we'll be ready.
How? Kieran asked.
Elena smiled, and for the first time since Marcus had delivered his warning, she felt genuinely confident. By doing what we've been doing all along, building connections. Showing the European authorities that cooperation isn't just an idealistic dream, it's a practical reality that's already working. She stood, pacing to the porch railing as ideas began forming in her mind. Owen, how many pack leaders can we realistically bring to the assembly? As official delegates? Maybe 6 or 7. But if we include the observation delegation... Owen's eyes lit up as he caught on to her thinking. We could have representatives from every major territory on the continent. A show of unity, Marcus said approvingly, demonstrating that your support isn't just theoretical. More than that, Elena said, her excitement building. A working demonstration. If the European authorities can see the connections in action, feel the strength of the unified communities. She turned to face the others. How do you argue against something that's demonstrably successful? You find ways to make it look dangerous instead of beneficial, Kieran said quietly. Which is exactly what the Order will try to do. Elena nodded. Then we make sure our demonstration is so compelling, so obviously positive, that even their fear-mongering can't undermine it. The next hour was spent in intense planning, working out logistics and strategies for the Continental Assembly. By the time they broke for breakfast, Elena felt more prepared for the challenges ahead than she had since the convergence. But as she watched her packmates gather around the communal dining table, laughing, sharing stories, working together with the easy cooperation that had become second nature, she was reminded that she wasn't just fighting for an abstract ideal. She was fighting for this, for the possibility that every supernatural family could have what she'd found here. For a future where her children, hers and Kieran's when they were ready, could grow up in a world where cooperation was stronger than fear. Penny for your thoughts? Saya asked, sliding into the chair beside her. Just thinking about the future, Elena said. About what we're trying to build. Saya's expression grew uncharacteristically serious. It's worth fighting for, she said simply. All of it. The connections, the unity, the hope. Her silver eyes found Elena's. You've given us something we didn't even know we were missing. What's that? The belief that things can actually get better instead of just staying the same or getting worse. Saya's smile was fierce and proud. That's not a small gift, Elena. That's revolutionary. As Elena looked around the table at the faces of her chosen family, she felt the silver threads of connection humming with strength and purpose. The Order might be planning their next attack, the European authorities might be skeptical, and the future might be uncertain. But she had this. She had them. And, together, they were going to change the world. Chapter 10. The attack came at dawn, 2 days before they were scheduled to leave for the Continental Assembly. Elena woke to the sound of Kieran's low growl and the scent of smoke drifting through their bedroom window. Her enhanced senses immediately cataloged the wrongness in the air. Not just smoke, but something acrid and unnatural that made her power recoil instinctively. Order, Kieran said tersely, already moving toward the window. They're burning something at the territory boundary. Elena was out of bed and pulling on clothes before he finished speaking. Through their mate bond, she could feel his tension, his protective instincts warring with tactical caution. Whatever the Order was doing, it was meant to provoke exactly this response. It's a trap, she said. I know. Kieran's smile was sharp and predatory. But we can't ignore a direct threat to pack territory. By the time they reached the main lodge, the entire pack was assembled and armed. Astrid stood near the large windows, her pale eyes fixed on the orange glow visible through the trees. Saya checked her weapons with the methodical precision of someone preparing for war. Owen clutched his tablet, his face pale but determined. Report, Kieran commanded as they approached. 3 separate fires along our northern boundary, Marcus said grimly. All burning with that unnatural flame the Order uses. But that's not the worst part. Elena felt her stomach clench. What's the worst part? They're not just burning trees, Astrid said, her voice carrying an edge Elena had never heard before. They're burning pack memorial stones. Sacred sites. Places where our ancestors are honored. The collective growl that rose from the assembled pack was unlike anything Elena had ever heard, pure rage and grief combined into something that made her bones vibrate. These weren't just random attacks on territory. They were desecrations, calculated insults designed to provoke the most emotional response possible. How many sites? Kieran asked, his voice deadly calm. 7 confirmed, Owen said, consulting his tablet with shaking hands. Including the Founder's Grove where the first Blackthorne Alpha is buried. Elena watched the last of Kieran's restraint crumble. Power radiated from him in waves that made the air shimmer, and she could see his human form beginning to blur as his wolf fought for dominance. They want us to come after them, she said quickly, stepping into his line of sight. They want us angry and reckless and thinking with our hearts instead of our heads. They're desecrating our sacred places, Saya snarled. We can't just let that stand. No, Elena agreed. We can't, but we also can't give them what they want. She looked around at the faces surrounding her. Pack members she'd come to love, people who would follow Kieran into hell if he asked. What do they gain if we attack? Proof that the new alliances are unstable, Owen said, understanding dawning in his brown eyes. If we respond with violence, if we break the peace we've been building, it validates everything they've been saying about supernatural cooperation being impossible, Elena finished. They can point to our response as evidence that we're too dangerous to integrate with human society. Kieran's jaw clenched, but she could see him wrestling his rage back under control. So, what do you suggest? We let them burn our heritage to ash. Elena closed her eyes, reaching out through the silver network of connections she'd woven. The bond stretched far beyond the Blackthorne territory now, connecting them to dozens of allied packs across the continent. If she was right about the Order's strategy, they're not just attacking us, she said, opening her eyes with grim certainty. This is happening to every pack that pledged support at the Convergence. They're trying to provoke a continental war right before the assembly. Marcus cursed under his breath. How many? Elena extended her awareness further, following the threads of connection to their allied territories. What she found made her stomach turn. All of them. Every pack that publicly supported the Unity Initiative is under attack. Coordinated strikes, Astrid said, her tactical mind already working through the implications. Designed to make us look like we can't control our own people. Worse, Kieran said grimly. If even one pack breaks and retaliates, the Order can claim the entire alliance is a failure. They'll have their proof that supernatural cooperation inevitably leads to violence. Elena felt the weight of destiny settling on her shoulders again, but this time it came with a clarity that surprised her. The Order thought they understood her, thought they knew how she would respond to this provocation. They expected either violent retaliation or passive acceptance, both of which would serve their purposes. They didn't expect option 3. Owen, she said, her voice carrying a note of authority that made every pack member straighten to attention. I need you to contact every allied pack leader simultaneously. Emergency conference, maximum priority. Elena, Kieran said carefully, what are you thinking? She turned to face him, and he stepped back at the silver fire blazing in her eyes. I'm thinking it's time to show the Order what unity actually looks like. The next hour was a blur of coordinated activity. Using the communication networks Owen had been developing, Elena managed to establish contact with 17 pack leaders whose territories were under attack. The conversations were tense, filled with barely controlled rage and demands for retaliation, but Elena's calm authority gradually imposed order on the chaos. This is exactly what they want, she told the assembled leaders during their emergency video conference. They want us scattered, reactive, fighting individual battles instead of working together. My pack's sacred grove is burning, snarled an alpha from the Pacific Northwest. They defiled the burial site of my grandmother. How do you expect me not to respond? I don't, Elena said simply. I expect you to respond magnificently. All of us, together, in a way they'll never see coming. She outlined her plan quickly, watching as understanding dawned on face after face. It was audacious, risky, and completely contrary to everything the Order expected from individual pack responses. Instead of 17 separate retaliations, Elena proposed something unprecedented, a coordinated demonstration of supernatural cooperation that would happen simultaneously across the continent. Not violence, but its opposite, a massive public works project that would benefit both supernatural and human communities. "Think about it," she said, her excitement building as the plan took shape. "They want to prove we're dangerous. So we prove we're beneficial. Every pack, every territory, working together on projects that help everyone. Disaster relief, environmental restoration, community assistance. All done openly, all done cooperatively." "That's insane," the Northwest Alpha said. But his expression was thoughtful rather than dismissive. "It's brilliant," said another voice, Maya, the alpha of a pack from the Southwest. "They can't attack us for helping people. And if they try to spin humanitarian aid as dangerous, they look like monsters," Kieran finished, pride evident in his voice as he followed Elena's reasoning. "But the exposure risk," worried another alpha. "If we work openly with human communities, then we control the narrative," Elena said firmly. "We show humans that supernatural beings can be neighbors, helpers, protectors. We make the Order's fear-mongering look like exactly what it is, prejudice and hatred dressed up as concern." The debate continued for another 30 minutes, but Elena could feel the tide turning. Pack after pack pledged their support for the coordinated response, recognizing that unity in action would be more powerful than individual retaliation. By the time the conference ended, they had commitments from 15 territories to participate in simultaneous humanitarian projects. The Blackthorne Pack would coordinate flood relief efforts in a nearby human town that had been devastated by recent storms. The Pacific Northwest Pack would work with environmental groups to restore fire-damaged forests. The Southwest Pack would provide disaster response training to remote communities. "This is either going to be the most successful supernatural public relations campaign in history," Saya said as they finalized the plans, "or it's going to get us all killed." "Both are possible," Elena admitted. "But doing nothing guarantees failure. At least this way, we go down fighting for something worth preserving." As the pack began preparing for their humanitarian mission, Elena felt a familiar presence at the edge of her awareness. She turned toward the window and saw a figure standing at the tree line, tall, robed, radiating the cold malevolence she'd come to associate with the Order. The figure raised one hand in what might have been a salute or a threat, then melted back into the shadows. But its message was clear. The Order was watching, waiting to see how she would respond to their provocation. Elena smiled, and there was nothing gentle about the expression. "Let them watch," she murmured to herself. "They're about to see what real power looks like." As the sun climbed higher, illuminating the smoke still rising from the desecrated memorial sites, Elena felt the silver network of connections humming with purpose and determination. The Order had meant to divide them, to prove that unity was impossible when faced with real pressure. Instead, they had given Elena exactly what she needed, an opportunity to demonstrate that supernatural cooperation wasn't just an idealistic dream, but a practical force capable of changing the world for the better. The Continental Assembly was still 2 days away, but the real test would begin in just a few hours, when 17 packs across North America would prove that they could work together not just in ceremony, but in service. Elena looked out at her pack, her family, as they prepared to help strangers who didn't even know supernatural beings existed. Pride swelled in her chest, along with a fierce determination to protect everything they were building. The Order wanted a war. Instead, they were going to get something far more dangerous. Hope made manifest, unity in action, and proof that fear didn't have to win. Chapter 11. The human town of Cedar Falls had been devastated by the flash floods 3 weeks earlier. Elena stood on what used to be Main Street, watching muddy water still trickling between buildings that had been gutted by the torrent. Cars sat overturned like discarded toys, and the acrid smell of mold and decay hung heavy in the air. 43 families displaced, Owen reported, consulting his tablet. Local emergency services are completely overwhelmed. The state's promised aid, but it won't arrive for another week at minimum. Perfect, Elena thought grimly. The Blackthorne Pack's humanitarian mission had been carefully chosen, a community in desperate need, isolated enough that supernatural assistance wouldn't draw unwanted media attention, but visible enough to serve as a powerful demonstration of what cooperation could accomplish. Positions? Kieran asked through the pack bond they'd opened for coordination. Elena felt the responses immediately. Astrid and half the pack were positioned around the town's perimeter, ready to intervene if the Order tried to disrupt their work. Saya led a team focused on search and rescue, using their enhanced senses to locate survivors who might have been missed. Marcus coordinated supply distribution, drawing on resources from allied packs across the region. All teams ready, Elena confirmed. Remember, we're here to help, not to hide. If humans ask questions about our abilities, we answer honestly but carefully. We're strong, we're organized, and we're here because it's the right thing to do. It was a calculated risk. Exposure to the human community was inevitable when supernatural beings used their abilities openly. But Elena had gambled that context would matter, that humans facing genuine crisis would be more concerned with getting help than with questioning where that help came from. Contact in 3, 2, 1. The pack moved into action with fluid precision. Elena watched Kieran approach the local emergency coordinator, a tired-looking woman in her 50s who'd been coordinating volunteer efforts from a tent near the fire station. "Ma'am, I'm Kieran Blackthorne. My team is here to assist with flood relief efforts." The woman, her name tag read Susan Riley, emergency coordinator, looked up from her clipboard with weary hope. "Thank God. Are you with FEMA? Red Cross. Private organization," Kieran said smoothly. "We specialize in disaster response. We've brought supplies, equipment, and personnel." Elena felt her heart clench as she watched Susan's face light up with the first genuine relief she'd probably felt in weeks. This was what the Order couldn't understand. Humans weren't monsters waiting to destroy anything different. They were people in need, grateful for help regardless of its source. "How many volunteers?"
Susan asked.
37, Kieran replied. All experienced in emergency response, search and rescue, and construction. 37. Susan's voice cracked slightly. "We've been begging for additional personnel for weeks. The state keeps saying they don't have the resources." "We have the resources," Elena said, stepping forward. "And we're here to use them." The next 6 hours passed in a blur of coordinated effort that made Elena's heart soar with pride. The pack worked openly, using their supernatural abilities with care, but without hiding. When Saya's enhanced hearing located a trapped family in a collapsed basement, no one questioned how she'd heard their faint cries through tons of debris. When Marcus's team cleared blocked roads with seemingly impossible speed and strength, the grateful residents simply called them efficient. Most remarkably, when Elena used her healing abilities to treat a volunteer who'd suffered a severe cut from twisted metal, the woman simply stared in wonder and whispered, "You're an angel." "Not an angel," Elena said gently. "Just someone who wants to help." By afternoon, the transformation was visible even to casual observers. Streets that had been impassable were cleared. Families who'd been sleeping in emergency shelters were moving back into cleaned and restored homes. The local hospital, which had been overwhelmed with flood-related injuries, was nearly empty as Elena and several pack members with healing abilities worked their way through the casualty list. "This is incredible," Susan said, finding Elena during a brief break. "I've been coordinating disaster response for 20 years, and I've never seen anything like this. Your people work like they're connected somehow. Like they're all parts of the same organism." Elena smiled, feeling the pack bonds humming with shared purpose and satisfaction. "We are, in a way. We're family." "All 37 of you?" "All 37 of us," Elena confirmed. "Blood doesn't always determine family, Ms. Riley. Sometimes it's choice that matters most." Susan was quiet for a moment, studying Elena's face with the sharp intelligence that had probably made her good at her job. "There's something different about your group, isn't there? Something special." Elena felt her pulse quicken. This was the moment she'd been preparing for. The first real test of whether humans could handle partial truth about supernatural existence. Yes, she said simply. There is. I thought so. Susan's expression was thoughtful rather than fearful. The way you found the Martinez family when our thermal imaging couldn't detect them. The speed your construction teams work at. That thing you did with young Tommy's broken arm that shouldn't have healed so cleanly so fast.
She paused.
I don't suppose you'd care to explain? Elena looked around at the town that had been transformed in a single day, at the humans working alongside supernatural beings without fear or suspicion, at the proof that cooperation was not only possible but beneficial. We're not entirely human, she said quietly. My people have abilities that most humans don't. Enhanced senses, accelerated healing, unusual strength. We've spent most of our history hiding because we were afraid of how humans would react. Susan nodded slowly. And now? Now we're trying something different. We're trying to help instead of hide. Good, Susan said firmly. Because the world needs more people like you, human or otherwise. Elena felt tears prick at her eyes. It was that simple. No fear, no demands for proof or scientific explanation, no religious panic or governmental intervention. Just acceptance, gratitude, and the recognition that good people doing good work deserve support regardless of their origin. Thank you, Elena whispered. No, Susan said, clasping Elena's hands in both of hers. Thank you. All of you. Cedar Falls will remember this day for generations. As evening approached and the pack began preparing to depart, Elena felt the silver network connections blazing with reports from allied territories across the continent. Every pack had stories similar to theirs, supernatural beings working openly with human communities, abilities used for healing and helping rather than hiding or hunting. The Pacific Northwest pack had saved a dying forest, working alongside environmental scientists who marveled at their seemingly intuitive understanding of plant and animal behavior. The Southwest pack had provided medical aid to remote communities, their healing abilities saving lives that conventional medicine couldn't have reached in time. The Great Lakes pack had helped repair storm damage to a children's hospital, their supernatural strength allowing them to complete weeks of work in a single day. 17 territories, 17 demonstrations of supernatural cooperation, 17 communities of humans who now knew that beings with extraordinary abilities existed, and were grateful for their help. It's working, Owen said, monitoring news feeds and social media on his tablet. Local coverage is overwhelmingly positive. The stories are spreading but slowly and organically. No mass panic, no government intervention, just acceptance. Elena felt a surge of triumph that was immediately tempered by wariness. The order had been conspicuously absent during the day's activities, which meant they were planning something else. Elena. Kieran's voice carried a note of tension that made her immediately alert. We have company. She turned to see 3 figures approaching across the cleared main street. Not order representatives, these moved with different energy, older and more refined. As they drew closer, Elena recognized the expensive suits and aristocratic bearing of the European delegates from the Continental Assembly. Lord Blackwood led the group, his pale eyes taking in the transformed town with obvious interest. Beside him walked a woman Elena didn't recognize, tall and elegant with silver hair and an aura of immense age. The third figure was younger, perhaps only a few centuries old, with the kind of casual perfection that spoke of vampire heritage. Ms. Ravencrest, Lord Blackwood said, stopping a respectful distance away. I hope you don't mind the unexpected visit. We were curious about your response to the morning's provocations. Elena felt every pack member within range shift to high alert, but she kept her voice calm and welcoming. Lord Blackwood, you're welcome here, though I admit I'm surprised to see you before the assembly. Current events demanded our attention, the silver-haired woman said, her accent carrying notes of languages that predated most modern nations. Lady Evangeline Montclair, she introduced herself. European Council, Northern Territories. And I am Victor Castellanos, the younger vampire added with a slight bow. Southern European representation. Elena inclined her head respectfully. To what do I owe the honor? Lord Blackwood smiled, and for the first time since she'd met him, the expression seemed genuinely warm. We came to witness the aftermath of your, shall we say, unconventional response to the Order's attacks. And what did you witness? Something unprecedented, Lady Montclair said quietly. In 8 centuries of existence, I have never seen supernatural beings work so openly with human communities. The risk you took today. The trust you showed, Victor corrected gently. Both in your own people and in human nature. It was inspiring. Elena felt her heart rate accelerate. These were some of the most powerful supernatural beings in the world, authorities who could make or break her vision of gradual revelation and cooperation. The Order predicted chaos, Lord Blackwood continued. They insisted that exposure would lead to panic, persecution, or worse. Instead, he gestured to the bustling town around them, where humans and supernatural beings continued working side by side as darkness fell. Instead, we find harmony. One day doesn't prove long-term viability, Elena said carefully. But it does prove possibility. Indeed it does. Lady Montclair's ancient eyes sparkled with something that might have been hope. Ms. Ravencrest, the Continental Assembly, was prepared to hear your proposal with polite skepticism. After today's demonstration across 17 territories. She paused, her smile growing wider. I believe we may be prepared to hear it with genuine interest. Elena felt the pack bonds blazing with shared triumph and relief. But underneath the celebration, she sensed something else, a darkness approaching, a presence that made her power stir uneasily. The Order isn't finished, she said quietly. No, Lord Blackwood agreed, his expression growing serious. In fact, I suspect today's success has made you far more dangerous to them than violence ever could have. They can fight warriors, but they cannot fight an idea whose time has come. As if summoned by his words, the temperature around them plummeted. Frost began forming on nearby surfaces despite the mild evening air, and every supernatural being in the area felt the approach of something ancient and malevolent. They come, Lady Montclair said, her voice carrying notes of power that made the air itself vibrate. Elena turned toward the darkness gathering at the edge of town, feeling the Order's presence like ice water in her veins. But this time, she wasn't afraid. This time, she had allies who believed in her vision, humans who had accepted supernatural help with gratitude, and proof that cooperation was stronger than fear. Let them come, she said, silver fire beginning to dance around her hands. It's time to finish this. Chapter 12. The Order materialized from the shadows like living nightmares, their ancient power turning the warm evening air into something cold and malevolent. Elena counted at least 20 robed figures surrounding the town's perimeter, moving with the coordinated precision of beings who had perfected the art of destruction over millennia. At their center stood the creature she'd faced at the stone circle, but now its human disguise was gone entirely. What remained was something that hurt to look at directly, a writhing mass of shadow and malice that seemed to devour light itself. You have meddled in forces beyond your comprehension, child. It spoke, its voice echoing from everywhere and nowhere at once. Today's demonstration has contaminated 17 human communities with knowledge they were never meant to possess. The damage must be contained. Elena felt every human in Cedar Falls react to the Order's presence with primal terror, but something extraordinary happened. Instead of scattering in panic, the townspeople moved closer to their supernatural protectors. Susan Riley stepped directly behind Elena, her middle-aged frame trembling but determined. Contaminated? Elena's voice rang clear and strong across the street. You mean helped, healed, protected. You mean shown the truth, Kieran added, moving to her side with predatory grace. The mate bond between them blazed with shared determination. Lord Blackwood and the European delegates formed a defensive line with the Blackthorne pack, their combined power creating a barrier that made the air itself shimmer. But Elena could feel the Order's overwhelming numbers, their centuries of experience in magical warfare. The truth is poison, the shadow creature hissed. Humans fear what they cannot understand. They destroy what they fear. We have maintained the barriers between worlds to protect both sides from inevitable genocide. Have you? Elena stepped forward, silver fire beginning to dance around her hands. Or have you maintained those barriers to keep both sides weak and isolated? To ensure that neither humans nor supernatural beings could grow beyond the limitations you've imposed. She felt the silver network of connections she'd forged that morning, not just between the packed territories, but between supernatural beings and humans across 17 communities. The threads hummed with shared purpose, mutual respect, and something the Order had never expected: genuine friendship. Look around you, Elena continued, gesturing to the transformed town. Humans and supernatural beings working together. No fear, no violence, no apocalyptic chaos. Just cooperation, understanding, and the recognition that we're stronger together than apart. The Order representative laughed, a sound like breaking bones. A single day's illusion. Wait until the novelty fades, until human prejudice and supernatural pride reassert themselves. Wait until the first conflict, the first misunderstanding, the first death. There will be conflicts, Elena agreed calmly. There will be misunderstandings. People, human and supernatural, will make mistakes because we're all imperfect beings trying to do our best in complicated situations. She paused, feeling the weight of every gaze focused on her. Order creatures hungry for her failure, European delegates measuring her words against centuries of experience, pack members radiating faith in her wisdom, humans discovering they were willing to die defending beings they'd only met that morning. But that's not a reason to abandon hope, Elena continued. That's a reason to keep working, keep building trust, keep choosing understanding over fear. Because the alternative, eternal division, endless suspicion, centuries more of hiding and hatred, isn't sustainable anymore. The shadow creature writhed with frustrated rage. Naive child. You think your pretty words can override millennia of evolutionary programming? Humans and supernatural beings are natural enemies. That is biological fact, not cultural prejudice. Is it? Elena smiled, and power began building around her like a miniature star. Then explain this. She reached out through the silver network, connecting not just to the supernatural beings in her immediate vicinity, but to every human who had worked alongside them that day. The connections blazed to life, creating a web of mutual support and affection that stretched across the continent. But more than that, Elena began weaving something new, bonds that connected human and supernatural directly, not through her as an intermediary but heart to heart, soul to soul. She felt Susan Riley's fierce protectiveness linking with Astrid's warrior pride. She sensed the local fire chief's gratitude intertwining with Saya's natural leadership. She watched Tommy Martinez, the boy whose arm she'd healed, form a connection with Owen that sparkled with shared intellectual curiosity. Impossible, the Order representative breathed, its form flickering as if the connections Elena was creating caused it physical pain. Humans cannot sustain supernatural bonds. They lack the necessary spiritual architecture. They lack nothing, Elena said firmly. They have hearts capable of love, minds capable of growth, and souls capable of connection. That's all anyone needs. The bonds she was weaving grew stronger, spreading outward from Cedar Falls to encompass the other 16 territories where supernatural beings had worked openly with human communities. Thousands of connections formed in seconds, bridges of understanding that transcended species boundaries and created something unprecedented in recorded history. A true alliance. Not supernatural beings protecting helpless humans or humans tolerating dangerous monsters, but equals working together toward shared goals. You're destroying everything, the shadow creature wailed, its form beginning to unravel as the connections Elena had forged created a network of light that pushed back against its fundamental darkness. The balance, the natural order, the protection we've maintained for centuries. The prison you've maintained, Elena corrected gently, for both sides. But prisons can be opened, fears can be healed, and enemies can become family if they choose to trust instead of fight. She extended her power toward the Order representatives, not to attack, but to offer the same healing she'd given to every other wounded soul she'd encountered. It's not too late. You can choose differently. You can help us build something better than eternal conflict. Never. The shadow creature lashed out with tendrils of pure malevolence, aiming not for Elena but for the humans standing behind her. If you will not see reason, perhaps the death of your precious allies will. The attack never reached its target. Kieran intercepted the first tendril with claws that blazed with silver fire. Astrid caught the second with a blade that sang with harmonic frequencies. Lord Blackwood absorbed the third into his own ancient power and transformed it into something beautiful. But it was Susan Riley who delivered the killing blow. The middle-aged emergency coordinator stepped forward, placing herself directly between the shadow creature and the other townspeople. She had no supernatural abilities, no magical weapons, no centuries of combat experience. What she had was something far more powerful: absolute moral clarity. "No," she said simply. "You don't get to hurt people in my town." The word rang with such conviction, such unshakable determination, that it created ripples in reality itself. Elena felt the force of Susan's will, purely human, utterly ordinary, and completely unstoppable when focused on protecting others. The shadow creature recoiled as if struck. "You are nothing. A mortal insect with delusions of significance." "I'm a human being standing up for her friends," Susan replied calmly. "And that's more power than you'll ever understand." She turned to address the other order representatives, her voice carrying clearly across the frozen street. "We've seen what you offer: fear, division, hatred disguised as protection. We've also seen what they offer: healing, cooperation, hope made manifest." Susan gestured to Elena and the assembled supernatural beings. "The choice isn't hard. We choose them. We choose trust over suspicion, growth over stagnation, love over fear." A murmur of agreement rose from the gathered townspeople, growing stronger as other voices joined the chorus. Elena felt her heart soar as she realized what she was witnessing: the moment when ordinary people chose to be extraordinary, when fear lost its hold on human hearts. "This is contamination," the shadow creature shrieked, its form becoming increasingly unstable as the web of connections Elena had woven pushed against its fundamental nature. "This is exactly what we warned against. This is evolution," Elena said quietly. "This is growth. This is what happens when beings choose love over fear." She took a step toward the unraveling order representative, power flowing around her like liquid starlight. "You've spent so long fighting the darkness that you became it. You've been so afraid of change that you forgot change is how life survives and thrives." The shadow creature made one final, desperate attempt to attack, but its power scattered harmlessly against the network of connections Elena had forged. Supernatural and human allies stood together, their combined strength creating something greater than the sum of its parts. "I offer you the same choice I've offered everyone else," Elena said, extending her hand toward the dissolving representative. "Join us. Help us build something better. Choose healing over hatred." For a moment, the creature hesitated. Elena could feel its internal struggle, millennia of certainty warring against the undeniable proof that its fundamental assumptions might be wrong. Then, with a sound like a dying wind, it made its choice. "Some things cannot be forgiven," it whispered. "Some changes cannot be undone. If this is the future you insist on building." The shadow creature began to fade, its form dissolving into mist and memory. "Then you will face the consequences without us." The remaining order representatives followed their leader's example, vanishing into the darkness they'd emerged from. But Elena could feel that their departure wasn't a retreat, it was an abdication. They were abandoning their self-appointed role as guardians of the barriers between worlds, leaving that responsibility to others. Leaving it to her. "It's over," Kieran said softly, moving to her side as the last traces of order presence faded. "No," Elena replied, looking around at the faces surrounding her, supernatural beings and humans united by shared experience and mutual respect. "It's beginning." Lord Blackwood approached with an expression of profound respect. Ms. Ravencrest, what you've accomplished here, the Continental Assembly will want to hear everything. The implications for supernatural human relations across the globe are something we'll figure out together, Elena finished. All of us, human and supernatural, working as equals toward a better future. She felt the silver network pulsing with life and possibility, stretching across the continent and growing stronger with each passing moment. The connections weren't just between supernatural beings anymore. They included humans who had chosen to trust, to hope, to believe in something better than endless conflict. The prophecy is fulfilled, Lady Montclair said wonderingly. The moon-blessed daughter has united not just the Pax, but both worlds. Elena smiled, feeling the mate bond singing between her and Kieran, the pack bonds humming with familial love, and the new connections sparkling with infinite potential. The prophecy was never about me specifically, she said. It was about all of us. About the choice to build bridges instead of walls, to heal wounds instead of deepening them, to trust in the possibility of something better. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Elena looked out at the faces of her chosen family, supernatural and human, ancient and young, former strangers who had become allies through shared purpose and mutual respect. The hidden power had never been magic or supernatural abilities. It had been this, the capacity to choose love over fear, understanding over ignorance, unity over division. And that power existed in every heart willing to embrace it. The age of hiding was ending. The age of understanding had begun. And together, there was nothing they couldn't accomplish.